Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me as we take a look at your April forecast. And it's April Fool's Day. This is going to feel like an April 1st or April Fool's Day forecast. But unfortunately, this is reality. Winter has arrived after the first week of spring. So, yeah. That's where we're at. This is going to be quite the storm this week. There are definitely still some uncertainties with it. I'm going to have all your details for you. Try to suss those out. Some of it depends somewhat on how high up on the mountains you live in terms of total snowfall accumulation. But I think all of us are going to see enough wintry weather that it's going to be slippery in all locations, particularly on Thursday. And all of us are going to see some pretty high impacts from this storm, kind of no matter what happens. But definitely not entirely locked in on all the details yet, but we're going to do the best we can. Yet again, another one of these forecasts. Hopefully this one doesn't bomb, although maybe you'd like it if I bombed this time, because I'm going to call for a pretty good amount of snow, a lot of snow. And, last time I was wrong in the other direction. Didn't think we were going to get much snow, and then a lot of us ended up with a ton of snow. Maybe this one will go the other way. You never know. A caveat, this is another tight forecast, so the range of possible outcomes is still pretty high. But what's different about this storm than some of the other ones we've had, it's going to be a big, long duration storm that evolves slowly and it's going to have different phases. And you're going to maybe sometimes feel like, maybe it's kind of finished up and we're done. And then things are going to get going again. But as you can kind of see, and even now the setup looks like that, right? So the main upper level thrust of our storm system is still way out west of us. Off the coast of California. There's several different swirls in the atmosphere here kind of coming on shore as well. But we've also got this, we've tapped the subtropical jet stream, which is still somewhat active. We've talked about this a bunch, but this is still somewhat active within a kind of an El Nino feature. And this is kind of a typical spring storm. And we're going to wrap up a strong storm with a lot of severe weather across the southeastern United States, across the Midwest. And then it's eventually going to establish itself, redevelop off the coast of the United States. Sometimes these are called Miller-type B storms. That's kind of a technical term, but anyway, of the way that we have these storms that ride up west of the Appalachians and then transfer their energy off the coast. And this is going to do it. It's going to do it in a slow fashion, and exactly how that transition happens and where exactly, especially not so much at the surface, but at the low to mid levels of the atmosphere, temperatures wind up will depend on who sees kind of a mix of rain, snow, and sleet, and who sees mostly snow. I think most areas above 1,000 feet are going to see mostly snow out of this, except for when it lightens up. When the precipitation lightens up, that's most likely to happen like Wednesday afternoon, maybe, or evening for a bit. When the precipitation lightens up, I think everybody kind of goes to a sleet or kind of a drizzly, kind of misty kind of situation, which is a little more liquid than snow. But whenever this precipitation gets heavier, particularly after Tuesday midday, it will stay snow for the most part above 1,000 feet, and then even below that as we go beyond that. But there are some uncertainties about that. Okay. First, we have this piece of energy that is kind of sliding south of us. Let's go to radar just to kind of see it. This first chunk of moisture is not going to approach us. But by tomorrow, like I said, this system, which is just starting to get going today, will really be wrapped up, and it'll be throwing moisture in our general direction. I don't think we'll really see anything tomorrow during the day. It's really overnight Tuesday that we get our first chance, and even overnight Tuesday is mostly dry. And then let's take a look at kind of temperatures first. So you can see we're obviously too warm right now, at least at the surface, for snow. But to our north, we have some cold enough temperatures. And if we actually had precipitation happening right now, our temperatures, while they're in the low 40s for a lot of locations or upper 30s, we would quickly drop down into the low to mid 30s, because what happens is the dew points are pretty low. We're relatively dry at the surface currently, and those dew points would come up, and the temperature goes down as that happens due to evaporative cooling, and you end up much chillier than we actually are. So even though temperatures today will top off in the mid to upper 40s, and you'll say, boy, it doesn't really feel like it's going to snow in 2 days. That dry air that's going to be eventually saturated with moisture allows for those temperatures to get close to freezing. And you don't have to be freezing right at the surface for snow to happen, particularly if the precipitation is heavier, but you got to be below freezing above the surface. And lots of places that's going to happen. The question is, do we get a layer of air in here that's a little above freezing that leads to some sleet? I don't think we're going to see a lot of freezing rain issues, although the last storm kind of surprised us in that way, and there's definitely a possibility of that, although right now I'm not too worried about it. Let's take a look. Whoops. Before we get into the storm evolution, here's your energy for the storm. And this is the first kind of, we've talked a lot this year about how we've had kind of split flow. That is, there's some northern energy and some southern energy, and they're nowhere close to each other. This is called a full latitude trough. It includes northern pieces of energy, a trough to the north, and a big trough to the south. And the whole thing kind of covers the full latitudes here. And so this is called a full latitude trough. And this is going to sweep across the country, kind of wrap up and become a big kind of cutoff low across us. And part of that slow evolution and that slow cutoff is why it's going to snow for so long. So let's take a look at the storm evolution. So by tomorrow midday, our storm's pretty well developed. It's in Chicago, or just southwest of Chicago, somewhere in kind of Illinois area. We've got a warm front that's starting to push moisture in our direction. And you can see already that warm front extends basically all the way to the coast. And it's along this warm front and kind of along this warmer surge of air that eventually we're going to get on the east side of the Appalachians, right across the coast, that coastal development. And especially what will happen too is some of the thunderstorms here will race out ahead of this cold front as we have lots of thunderstorm activity. As we head into Thursday overnight, you kind of start to see that happening. And so this is where we have our first chance at some precipitation, as some of that colder air that will be in place across New England gets overrun by some warmer air. And it's not that much warmer, but it starts to get a little overrunning precipitation with the warm front. And by then, we're already starting to develop the hints of a low pressure system, which may at this point kind of be a general broad area of low pressure. I've got it drawn over New Jersey here, but it's probably when the low really kind of forms, it'll probably form more across like the Delaware, the Delmarva Peninsula. But this system is still very much the dominant one, and anything that we get at this point would be light overnight. Higher elevations here could see it in the form of some flurries. I don't think we'll see really any accumulation Thursday overnight, but maybe a few sprinkles at lower elevations. But by Wednesday at midday, we can see this storm, our upper level low, is starting to die over Michigan. There's kind of this connected front that's not really a front anymore. We can sometimes call these occluded fronts, where there's really no temperature difference on either side of them, but they're sort of there still from old fronts. And we've got our new low pressure system starting to get going here, and it's starting to push warm Atlantic moisture onshore. And so the question is, do we get a nose of warmer air that tries to kind of sneak in to southern Vermont or not? And I think not really, but a little bit. Some of the latest models have implied that a little bit more. But by this time, we are starting to precipitate. The question too is how much of a dry slot will be kind of left over from this system. So do we end up kind of not really with steady precipitation Wednesday afternoon? That is definitely to be determined. It's pretty likely that by Wednesday overnight into Thursday, we're back to snow. And that's the time when I'm pretty confident we're going to get accumulating snow and significant accumulating snow everywhere, even to the valleys. But Wednesday afternoon is a little bit more undetermined. So in terms of your travel, Wednesday morning, we could have steady snow, I think, as a first kind of slug of it that comes relatively early on Wednesday morning. That will make it a little bit slick for a lot of places on Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon could be bad if we end up in steady snow, or it could be okay-ish. This is a little bit less. If you've got to travel on Wednesday, it's possible, but just be aware that it could be slick in spots, and it could be tricky. It could be variable. Thursday is basically a bad day to get out and drive. So let's take a look at that. Oops, we're going the wrong direction here. Wednesday overnight. Still continuing to let our upper level system die. And now we're starting, this system really kind of slows down and is cutting off as it's developing. So you're going to see it really does not move over about the 24-hour period here. We go from the Delmarva, just east of New York City, tip of Long Island, and maybe 12 hours later, we're talking Cape Cod, basically, with where the system is. At this point, we're into steady snow here. And it could be heavy at times Wednesday overnight. And then if we head into, keep going here, Thursday, midday, starting to wind down. The steadiest of the precipitation is we're on the backside, but anything here will be snow, and snow will be getting lighter, kind of a more fluffy as we go through this period. And so this slow duration there, that 12 to 24 hours from like Wednesday at 10 p.m. through about Thursday afternoon, mid to late afternoon, is when the steadiest and most accumulation will happen. Thursday's a tough travel day everywhere, basically. All right, so let's take a look at those accumulations, and they are big, basically everywhere, but particularly for the higher elevations. So basically, as we had above 1,000 feet across the spine of the greens, we are basically looking 12 to 18 inches, and then higher up above 1,500 feet, probably 16 to 24 inches. Particularly as you head a little bit further north. Some of these areas could even see a little bit more than that. Wouldn't be entirely surprised. I think a lot of ski areas end up close to 2 feet of snow out of this. If you head to the valley locations along the Connecticut River and along Route 7, 8 to 14 inches. And definitely concerned about power outages basically in any of these locations. This is going to be a pretty wet snow. I do think we're going to hold back on accumulations a little bit. Just in and around down in the Brattleboro and the Bennington area, where I think you're more like 4 to 8, so 6 inches. Wouldn't be surprised to see some places never get above about 6 inches down there. As I think you will, most of your accumulation won't happen until Wednesday night. You could be slippery still on Wednesday, but it might be more of a sleety kind of slipperiness than anything else. And again, these could move around. There's while the forecast is getting relatively close to the start of snow, we're still 60 hours from the end, 60 to 66 hours from the end of snow, which is still out there in a pretty good mid-range forecast model range. So models have been very locked in on this, although we've seen a lot of late movement in models over the last few storms, so it could still move around some. If we ended up warming up and this ended up a little bit more of a mixed precipitation system, obviously these numbers would come way down. I don't think they'll go much higher than this. There's just, we're basically looking at liquid equivalents of 2.5 inches. That's been very consistent. And so assuming we get that, that's about the amount of snow. If this was all snow, that's about what we would get. So there you go. Yeah, it's going to be a big dumping. Power outages definitely possible. Basically anywhere in here, it'll end up being where exactly the stickiest snow happens. Last time the power outages happened actually where we ended up in freezing rain. I thought we were going to, the snow where it fell as all snow was more powdery. Due to some mid-range or mid-elevation temperature issues or situations. Hard to know exactly, but definitely you should be prepared for potential power outages because the snow is likely to be pretty sticky for the most part. And so, which could also kind of push us towards the lower end. If it's very heavy snow, very, very heavy snow, then the 12 inches could fall. You could get 1.5 inches of liquid. Usually 1.5 inches would be at least 18 inches of snow for us here in Vermont. But it's possible that this will be sticky enough that you get 12 inches of snow, even though you get 1.5 inches of liquid equivalent. And if that happens, you're talking pretty significant power problems. So you should just be prepared to lose power basically anywhere. Just I'm sure what you want to hear as well. And assuming it, kind of hits in the right way, it could be for 12 to 24, 48 hours potentially. So depending on where you are. So just be aware of that. Let's take a look at the forecast. Essentially today and Friday, the only days you see sun, and very, very limited even those days. Flurries will continue. The storm is basically not going to move. It's just going to die over the top of us. So even Friday, flurries and a bit breezy is definitely possible. I think most of the mix happens relatively early in the storm. Probably could extend that mix through Wednesday, but then Wednesday night into Thursday, we're definitely snow. As you can see, temperatures, when we don't have precipitation falling, we're in the 40s, but then we cool back, and the storm, it'll be somewhere in there close to freezing for a lot of that range of the storm. Let's take just a quick look at the highlights of the storm. High impact, long duration winter storm will dominate the weather this week. Obviously, the bulk of precipitation will fall as snow above 1,000 feet. Wednesday, areas below 1,000 feet may see a mix of snow, sleet, and rain. Wednesday night into Thursday, everyone changes to snow, and that's when a lot of the accumulation happens. Snow showers and flurries linger into Friday. Let's take a look at, wrong button. Also the wrong button. Too many buttons today. Sorry about that. Storm details. Wednesday brings lighter precipitation. Precipitation rates pick up Wednesday night with the heaviest snow on Thursday. Power outages possible as the snow will be wet and heavy. Total accumulations ranging from around 6 feet in the Bennington, Brattleboro areas to close to 2 feet for the ski areas. At least that's my best call at this point. School cancellations, which I know my kids in Londonderry have not had a snow day all year, which is hard to believe. I know a bunch of you had at least one, but they have somehow missed that. Possible Wednesday and very likely on Thursday. I think just about everybody misses school on Thursday unless something pretty significant changes. So yeah, that's what's happening. Crazy April weather. What can we do? This will melt fast, just like the last storm did. That's the only thing I can say positive about this. I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons to help support what I do here at the West River Weather Guy. I really appreciate their help. I also want to encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not before. And if you have not if you are interested in becoming a patron, they support the channel financially and they get some benefits out of that. So if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to take a look at the link in the description below. I will be back each day this week with updates on the forecast. So this will be the longest one, but after this, I'll have kind of day-to-day updates and total snowfall maps and things like that. So yeah, that's where we're going to be, and it'll be a fun weather week, even if it's a little insane that this is happening the first week in April. All right, we'll be back tomorrow.